Tom Holbrook began the Gettysburg Living History Program in 1992. And we don't have our staff at this point, and this didn't happen recently, but from the time that I've started here, we're about half. If you think about the Rangers that you've known over the decades and so forth, we have failed to, as people have left, we have failed to backfill. Tom, being in charge of living history, is one of those Rangers who got lost in the ebb and flow because you never saw Tom. All Tom did for the majority of his career was drive in circles around this park every weekend. He would have a living history group here, a living history group here, and sometimes he'd have a living history group over here. And everybody wants to talk and to shoot. And Tom has got to make them all happy. Well, all he did was go in a circle right there. And so one Ranger, because I've got government efficiency on my mind right now, if you can imagine. One Ranger.
Make sure you write it down.
Yeah, I am actually after this program. I'm not kidding. One Ranger was able to deliver 10 programs in 2 days on average. Now another human being can't do that, without, first of all, the help of volunteers, which you see behind them right here. But Tom, starting in 1992, started picking out dozens of volunteer groups. If you can imagine how many thousands of hours that leads to come into Gettysburg and to encamp here and then build a program weekend after weekend until it was running at its height. He was running from April to October, basically every weekend. He was doing that. Now, where we got real comfortable with Tom is when we get the little safety. Safety's a big thing, nowadays. When we would get the emails about it being too hot and we needed to curtail our programs and we needed to seek shelter, get in the air conditioning and so forth, Tom does not get the email until he comes in next week. He's out there with them. And it took dedication, a lot of dedication to get it up to where it is today. Now, with the we'll see what happens, but with the cutbacks, it's not going to get any bigger, let's just say that. With the cutbacks that are impending, what will we do without the volunteers? And what will we do without the legacy of what Tom Holbrook built here? How about a round of applause for Tom? All right. Now, so I am not Tom. I do not know as much about civil artillery. So I will do my best. With every program, I try to sit I have 3 chairs in my office, two of which for visitors, if you get my humor. And, because I only need one, no. I try to sit in the other chair and I try to think to myself, if I was sitting in that chair, what would I want to know if I came to an introduction to artillery program? So I know I've got some heavyweights, quote unquote, out here in the audience, and possibly some of you have fired more blank artillery than I have, okay? So I recognize that. But this cannon program is basically for the novice. So I realized that, I could take it, I could take it a little bit deeper if I needed to. But I'm trying to hit a fine balance between educating and overwhelming. That's always the line. So let's start with the basic question here. So I'm trying to get untracked. What is a cannon? Isn't that the question I would ask if I was sitting in the other chair? Matt, what is a cannon? So, cannons have evolved over time. I need not tell you that I think not getting into specific dates, my recollection is the Chinese come up with gunpowder in the 12th century. If you want to get into cannons, if forerunners, you could get into catapults. Catapults don't even involve powder, but they involve stone. They involve hurling projectiles. You have to aim such things. I'm getting into, I can't say it, trebuchets. Did you know that, ma'am? You must be into medieval stuff. Yeah, every home needs one. A trebuchet. All domestic disputes can be solved with the trebuchet at 100 yards. And then, it evolves until it becomes into the American Civil War. The thing I would tell you, I'm more familiar with American artillery, United States artillery, than I am anything else, is if you go to a park, like a Revolutionary War park, such as Yorktown, notice how much larger the artillery pieces are compared to the pieces here at Gettysburg. Notice also when you look at the artillery pieces, how much smaller the actual cannon is. The cannon may be twice as big as what you see here at Gettysburg, but it might only throw a third of the weight of a shot that the one does here. Okay, so you got twice as much cannon for half as much shot is what I'm telling you. Things have streamlined. What is human beings constantly doing? We are constantly refining ways, at least in warfare, to maim and kill each other. And so, if you want to maim and kill each other, it behooves you to make it as easy as possible. And otherwise, streamline the operation until you can become efficient, militarily efficient. And toting around in the wilderness of America a 4,000-pound artillery piece is not conducive to mobility. So what do you want to do? You want to take that gun and you want to streamline it. Now they continue to revamp. And America has always been, and you could say this about Europe or wherever, but we're curious people. And in America, we're always test firing things. We're, trying to come up with the latest innovation. We've got bombs today that one bomb explodes and then a second bomb goes through that hole and explodes. I mean, whoever sat around and thought about such things? Now, from Revolutionary to Civil War times, we're trying to get our act together. But it's sort of like, NATO. You want to streamline, ideally you would want one piece of ammunition for everything, relatively oversimplifying. But in the course of America, we go through, in this innovative age, we go through with all these different types of new military cannon. And this is at Vicksburg, by the way, if anybody didn't guess that. And what you see, not to identify the cannons, but what you see with the black tubes are the early, I guess you would say pre-war, most of them pre-war cannons that were cast for coastal fortifications for the United States. You've got, in no certain order, a Columbiad. You've got a 32-pounder in there somewhere. If you're looking real close, you've even got a mortar toward the end of it. Right in front of us is a siege Parrott, probably a 30-pounder if I had to guess, right there. And in front, at the lowest point down here, is you have a different colored tube. And you have seen black tubes and you have seen green tubes all over this battlefield. Well, going back to how artillery progresses, there's always a trade-off. This is what I think we're learning somewhat between in our modern warfare with Ukraine right now. How long can you sustain a warfare where every shot you're taking costs $1 million? Would you rather have a $20 artillery shell or $1 million missile? That's what we're deciding right now, okay? And so America is trying to figure out which type of artillery piece they actually want. The trade-off which you see between the black and the green tubes right here is cost. The black tubes are, and I've been trying, I've spent the last minute and a half trying not to say this word right here. The black tubes are made out of iron, okay? And if your spouse does not understand, please explain it to them at this time. Iron. I-W-O-N, iron, probably I-R-R-O-N. How about that? Your black tubes are iron, okay? And they're cheap. You can cast a gun and you can make it very easily out of iron. But that green is made out of bronze. And what else do we make out of bronze that is famous in America? We make bells, lots of bells. The Liberty Bell is made out of bronze. You could melt the Liberty Bell into a cannon if you had enough weight in it. Now, bronze costs a lot more money. It takes, as you can imagine, a lot longer to cast than you will with an iron gun. Now, let's start with the differences. Bronze guns are what they were really leaning toward at the advent of the Civil War. That's what everybody really, really wanted. But you have a trade-off between, you know, it would probably, you might be able to turn out a bronze Napoleon one a month from casting to turning to finishing, or if I'm getting them all the steps in right. That iron gun you could. So once again, there's a trade-off. The iron gun, what you are trading right here is quantity for quality. Iron, when it gets hot, will not expand. That is the one thing that you get with bronze. That's why the artillerymen wanted bronze over black tubes or iron tubes right here. Because when iron gets hot and it expands, it cracks. All right? Bronze, when it gets hot, that green tube when it gets hot, will actually expand and contract when it cools. Bronze, therefore, can take more stress. Bronze, therefore, is a safer metal. If you're going to have a tube burst, it is going to be very rare in the Civil War where you have a bronze tube burst. I mean, you were probably trying to do it if it burst. I mean, they're wearing like that. Let me get my thing right here. So anyway, that's the first point. Iron, bronze. When you go across the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen, note it. That's the first thing you should pick out when you go through artillery. What type of gun is it? That's instantly what I'm looking for. Now, what are the two types of cannons out there? Now, I don't mean to confuse you, and I could, because it goes both ways. But pretty much, in general, do not write me letters about this. I know. In general, the majority of the bronze guns are smoothbore, and the majority of the iron guns are rifled. For the most part, in the Civil War, that is always true. Rifled versus smoothbore. Now, for the novice, you hanging with me? No? Well, at least you're honest. Rifling has what? Rifling. Smoothbore, does it have rifling? No. Okay. I got her right here. We have a young lady over here. She's not paying attention. Everybody in here has thrown a basketball, and everybody in here has thrown a football. Okay? Now, I'm going to ask you simple questions. Which is more accurate? The football. Why is the football more accurate? It's got rotates and it's got a different shape to it. It cuts through the air a different way. Okay? And it will go further and it will go straighter. The basketball, on the other hand, It hurts. It has more weight to it. It's bigger, but it's not as accurate. That's what you're trading off between rifled artillery in the Civil War and smoothbore artillery. I'm not saying that, I'm talking about field pieces. I'm not saying there aren't discrepancies, once again. But for the most part, round balls are coming out of bronze guns. And conical shells or bullet-shaped shells are coming out of iron guns. Okay? So, what does that mean? Here is a rifle gun. Do you see the grooves going down the barrel? Rifling. If you're ever within doubt in a Civil War park, walk up to the muzzle of the cannon and stick your hand all the way in there. Or you could be like me one time on a student program when I actually rammed the Napoleon out on the Wheatfield Road and brought out a bird's nest in front of the class. And I want you to know that the program was concluded basically at that moment. Although I did talk another half hour. But you see the grooves? Right through there? Yeah. And I might as well, I'm just, as I said, I had to pinch hit here, so it's not the most organized thing. I might as well, since we're here, go through what this means. When you go up to a Civil War cannon, ladies and gentlemen, the history of the tube is on it. Now, I'm not saying it's always going to be on the muzzle face like you see in this picture. It may be on the trunnions. Ooh, trunnions. Trunnions sit on the carriage. That's what the actual tube rests on the carriage. That's trunnions. That's the bronze piece right there. Anyway, they may be on the side, but what you have right here, and it may be a different order when you see it, but in some shape, form, or fashion, it's going to be like this, all right? If I can read it correctly. What you have, let's start down here, what I can read. Well, I think I can read it. 8161. So what you have here is the serial number, NO, you can't see it very well, NO number 931. Now this is the foundry. See the CO right here? Somebody might know the foundry. If you do, you would. Who? Phoenix. According to my original research, I have come to the conclusion that this is the Phoenix Iron Works Company, otherwise known as PI. Thank you. And over here, what do we have? It's the date that it was cast. And down here, I suppose, if I'm reading this correctly, would be the weight of the tube somewhere in there. So some people, some cannons will have them stamped differently, and some of them won't have all this information on them. But if you want to get into who, what, when, and where, then that's where you look. That's where these, experts that's where you would concentrate on. Now, let me say this. This is the problem. That gun right there, which is sitting in the National Cemetery, people come up to me all the time and they're like, was this gun at Gettysburg? I don't know if it was at Gettysburg or not. The government lost the serial numbers. So that gun may have been sitting in a harbor in New York City, or it could have been at the Battle of Stones River. It's. Y'all are losing part of the... There are tubes out on the field which may have been at Spotsylvania in 1864, and we just don't know the history of them. Or they could have not even fired a shot in anger. But we all got them when the National Military Park got these tubes. We all, the 5 original parks, I should say, got them from the arsenals. The United States military arsenal. They were just sitting there in a pile. It's heaped up, and we said we needed whatever, 80 Napoleons, and the War Department shipped them, All right. Let's talk about projectiles. Well, there you go. Smoothbore versus rifled. What do you see? Rifling has turns to it. What do we go back to the basketball and the football? When you throw that football, it does what? It spirals. When you shoot a smoothbore gun and that ball comes out, you got more windage to it. You don't have as tight, near tight. You have more leakage around the gases around the ball. So you get the same velocity of a rifle gun, but you have to add more powder in order to do it. If that makes sense. Now, about some of you artillery people, I'm starting to figure out who you are. Because anybody gonna know the Phoenix Iron Works is definitely.
We live near there.
Oh, do you? I was gonna say you're gonna need a girlfriend before it's all over. Different types of rifling. Y'all go ahead and just gaze upon that. Right there, okay? So you can see the barrel and the type of shell that might come out of it. That's a rifle gun. What does it mean? Some rifled shells actually fit the barrel. That is rare that they fit the barrel, but such as a Whitworth actually was tapered to the barrel. Most Civil War artillery, as far as rifling, has a cup on the bottom of the round, and I don't have a cup on it, but this is the shell. It would have a cup on the end of it, and so when the powder explodes, the cup would be made out of zinc or something like that. They would expand that soft metal in that cup, which is attached to the shell, would grip the rifling, which makes the shell start spinning, because behind this thing is all this pressure from this powder, and it's got to go somewhere, and there's nowhere but it to go but out the muzzle, because that barrel, that cannon has it trapped. And so all the forces of that, like a football, start sending this thing down range. Now, it is rare for you to see, if you go out on Steinway Avenue, to see a Civil War shell with the cup still on it that has been fired. Because when the shell comes whirling out of that muzzle right there, a lot of them would spin off. I've actually heard of them accidentally wounding people, from the cups flying wildly out of the place. But I have also seen metal detectors, I don't remember where, but it's not unusual to find these cups on a battlefield in random spots, if that makes sense. So, yeah, rifled shells. Oh, it's over here. Oh, lucky my head's attached, right? Here's some rifle shells. How's that look in the back? It looks blurry up here. You should be used to this. Let me stand over here. Now, look at that parrot shell. I want you to remember that parrot shell right there. Look at the shape of it. It's 10-pound reed. Anybody recognize that shell? That's the one found on Little Round Top. Fired from a Confederate 10-pound parrot on Warfield Ridge. Now, I can't tell you the exact gun, but you could narrow it down to a certain few batteries, the 10-pound parrot. Now, look at that, though. What do you see there? Part of the cup. See it around the end of that shell as it came in? Now, I learned this. I don't know if it would interest you or not, but you're going to learn anyway. I learned this, that with a rifle gun, you actually, and I'll tell you later how you load and fire the cannon, but with a rifle gun, it was very important to have the shell seated directly on the powder charge. The reason for that is to give it more torque when it was coming. Otherwise, if you didn't seat it, the rifled shells were more prone to tumble when they came out. And the only way, for example, in Pickett's charge, that the Confederate soldiers would see a rifled shell, if they were looking, as they were marching across the field, or vice versa for that matter, is if one had not been seated properly or was cast improperly and it was tumbling through the air. And, we'll get into fuses in a minute, but if it's tumbling, it's definitely not going through its feet per second. Now I'm switching over here to smoothbore ammunition. Now there are, for both rifled and smoothbore, there are 4 different types of ammunition. 4 different types. I don't care what kind of gun you're talking about on this battlefield, you have 4 different types of ammunition. Now this smoothbore, once again, is balled ammunition, or at least 3 out of the 4 rounds are. The first one that you have right here is going to be, in no certain order, from the left is the solid shot. A solid shot is usually what the cannon is named for. Hence the word 10-pound Parrott, 12-pound Napoleon. That is the weight of the solid shot. So you're out there. The cannon weighs more than 12 pounds. Okay? All right? So don't go out there and think you're going to put it in your trunk. But so the cannonball, as it goes out, being solid shot, can travel the furthest. I don't care if it's rifled or smoothbore. The weight of the shot makes it go further. Now, number 2 and number 3 rounds. Those are explosive rounds. I get questions all the time. Matt, did they have explosive rounds in the American Civil War? Yes. But once again, going back to the beginning of this talk, the evolution of artillery. In the Rev War days, some of those rounds would have to be hand lighted and then fired. If you can imagine the logistics in that, I'm thinking of mortars when I say this. But so it's a great deal of help if you can have a round that will ignite inside the barrel and you don't have to do it. So the 2 types of explosive rounds with the same ignition system I'll get to in a minute are spherical case and shell. Number 2 and number 3. Shell is a hollow cannonball filled with black powder. If I wanted to get people out of this building, I would fire shell into here, right? Because it causes a lot of fire, but not that much shrapnel. If I wanted to set the barn on fire, I would fire shell in there. So for the most part, they don't carry a lot of shell. They carry spherical case, because spherical case is the same cannonball I just told you, except the interior of the cannonball, instead of being filled with black powder, it's filled with black powder and shrapnel, usually little balls. Now, let's get into Hollywood with this stuff, with this explosive rounds. Everybody's seen Hollywood, and what's always happening in Hollywood, the soldiers are getting blown sky high in Hollywood. On the battlefield, did that happen? Yes, it did happen. But that's not what they wanted to happen. You don't want your artillery rounds exploding on the ground. What you want, if you were coming at me right now, what I want that round to do is to go off up here where this screen is. And when it bursts apart, I don't want it going off down here in the middle of you. I want it going off in front of you. And the forward momentum of the ball when it breaks apart, I'm thinking of the Matrix when I say this, but all these jagged pieces of iron and lead are going to come flying out, and the forward momentum is going to cast most of them toward you. You imagine it, and you can, from round ball to chunks of iron that would be coming out. Now, the 4th round is the most famous but least used. And this little can right here, or you can come up afterwards. I didn't expect but 20 people today. I want y'all to know. I thought, so I brought this stuff. I would have brought this stuff for 60. Right here, but here we are. This round right here is what's on that diagram. This is canister. It has 28 1.5-inch iron balls in this tin can. It is backed by a prefix round of 2 pounds of powder in a Napoleon, or a 12-pound howitzer, right? So they fire this thing right here, and the can, it's real thin metal, you'll see after the program. They fire this thing, and the can comes apart and sprays everybody downrange with these lead balls. In this case, once again, just like with the spherical case, I don't want to fire directly at you with canister. I want that canister hitting in front of you. I don't want to shoot it at you because balls, I want those balls ricocheting. I don't know how many of you have ever seen, look it up on YouTube. It sounds like quail. I don't know if you've ever flushed a covey of quail, but it's a high-pitched sound to these iron balls as they're flying through the air. A screeching sound almost to them. And you can see the dirt kicking up as they fly down through the field, and the dirt gets wider and wider the further they go. But what I'm trying to do as a gunner is to press the muzzle, and I want to fire it into you, not toward you, but I want those balls ricocheting about waist high. It's just like shooting a pistol. You have more chance to hit the head or the center mass, right? So that's what you're doing with that canister. Now, this round is rarely used, but most frequently written about. The problem with this round is it's short range. The problem with this round is if you're firing canister, they can shoot at you. And if you were shooting canister at me, it would be in my best interest to eliminate you as quickly as possible, you know. So it is rarely used, only in the most dire of circumstances. Now let me say, since we're on Artillery 101 right here, this little gadget you see over here is called grape. Do y'all see how it looks like a stand of grape that's standing right there? Could it be fired out of a cannon here? Yes, you can fire anything you want to out of a smoothbore cannon as long as you can get it in there. It'll go, I guarantee you. That's the nice thing about a thing. But grape is rarely used because it's heavy, and the balls are much bigger on grape. I forget how many is in the stand for Hauser, if I ever knew. But it's just, no. What grape was designed for was those big iron guns. Here we're back to that word again. The big iron guns that were for shipping. Think about firing a stand of grape into a wooden ship. Mast everywhere, sails everywhere. That grape rips through there and sails just start tumbling. Mainmast start tumbling. That's what you want. How do you ever sort that out with all these ropes cut all the way around? I mean, your ship's disabled. That's why you want grape. So I would label it more as an anti-personnel round with the canister and then grape being more of them. I mean, you could use it anti-personnel. My father would say if you firing grape at an infantry attack column, he wouldn't say it in this case, but basically what he would say is you're killing ants with the sledgehammer. All right, you know what I mean? Shooting quail with an elephant gun. You know, you can get it killed a little bit easier than that. How heavy is the what? Oh, I don't know the exact weight. Probably 8 to 10 pounds on it. All right, let's talk about fuses. Everybody's been waiting on it. How do you like the darn thing? You have two different types of fuses. You have a screw-in fuse, and you have a paper fuse. Okay? And they use both. They did. It depends on the type shell that you're talking about. I would say, I don't have any numbers for you, but I would say I'm not uncomfortable saying that the Confederates probably used more paper fuses on average than the Union did. However, the Union did use paper fuses also. There's an account by a Confederate where preceding Pickett's charge where a Union shell, you know, he's hunkered down in the, you know, trying to stay alive, and a shell lands right beside him, and it's burning. The fuse is burning in it. He takes a knife, his pocket knife out, or whatever he had, and he sticks it in the shell and flips that fuse out. Therefore, the shell didn't explode. It had to be a paper fuse, else it couldn't have done that, you know, but he extinguished the fire. So the problem with the fuses, and the reason that you see so many duds like for sale in Gettysburg today, is is in principle, when the shell explodes, the powder explodes. Well, here's the fuse. That fuse should be screwed into this hole. See how it's threaded? Maybe some of you in the back can't. But regardless, it's like putting the fuse, screwing the fuse in right here. Well, when the powder explodes, what's supposed to happen is the fire goes up to the front or the top of the fuse and lights it. And it burns down through the fuse until it strikes the main powder charge, and then it makes it go boom. Okay? A lot of times the fire from the powder explosion failed to ignite the fuse. That's why you see so many duds for sale out there. Let me give you a look at it. Right there. Now there's a screw-in plug. See how it would burn down to the center. Now, how do you adjust the fuse? Well, if it was like a Borman fuse, you might take it, think of it like as a watch, except it doesn't have 12 numbers on it. Let's put 6 on it. And you take a key, the artilleryman would call a key, and they would know feet per second for whatever round that they were firing, or it would be close to it. And you would look at a fire chart and you would say, if I'm going to fire this shell 800 yards, I need a 1.5 second burn. I'm just picking something, okay? Well, you take that watch face and you take that key and you go down between 1 and 2 and you punch it. All right, and that's where you cut that fuse, at least on this type of fuse. So what happens? When the flame engulfs the ball, it lights the top of this fuse right here. And where you cut it, it burns in a circle until the point to where it was tapped or it was cut. And once you hit that cut place, it allows the spark to start traveling down to the main charge. It's almost instantaneous, within a millisecond or whichever. And so that's how they time it out. Now, if you go back to the South, and I don't need to tell y'all anything you don't know here, the Confederates had a horrible time reportedly with their fuses during Pickett's charge. Well, think about it. If your fuses are incorrect, ladies and gentlemen, and you need, let's say, a 3-second burn from Seminary Ridge to Cemetery Ridge, and that fuse goes off, you set it for 3 seconds, and that fuse burns to 4 or 5, or it doesn't go off at all, or maybe it goes off at 2. If I'm the gunner and I'm trying to redirect my fire and I'm trying to figure out what's the right range here to hit my target, how do I ever get it straight? That's the problem with your fuses. Everything has got to work. The powder has got to be pretty consistent. The fuses have got to be consistent. I mean, you just can't have any of this go off and have any amount of accuracy that would go forth. But these fuses, whatever they got reportedly from Augusta, Georgia, for the Gettysburg campaign, they were just, for whatever reason, they were a bad batch. And so, that's the way it goes. Very ineffective. All right. Finally, some action. Like I said, I'm kind of winging it up here. Before we get into the type of cannons, I think one thing, if I could take a tangent, and y'all know I love tangents right here, is I think one thing that was always been underestimated, at least I never hear anybody talking about, is the animals on this battlefield. And I know we're all aware of it and all this other stuff, but the amount of animals that were killed or had to be killed. If you can imagine, for instance, those Union guns, those Union batteries up at the Peach Orchard, and they get into that crossfire of that Confederate artillery on July 2nd, and those horses are on the backside of the ridge, and those shells are ricocheting down the backside of the ridge. I mean, you would be knocking horses' legs off, but not killing them. You would have to, a lot of artillerymen had to get used to putting animals down. You cannot, and on another note, from a military standpoint, you cannot have with a team of horses, ladies and gentlemen, Don't ask me, I'm not a horse person. I started out at Petersburg National Battlefield, and we had horses and teams and so forth. And what I learned from that is that one horse can set the tone for the other 3 or the other 5. I cannot explain it, but you cannot have one horse going berserk in that team. You don't have that luxury to sit there, so you're going to make fast decisions with these animals out here. I just go ahead and say it, they're expendable. Now, how do you get the guns here? Now, the reason that I chose this picture is because you have a a battery limbered up. So you've got everybody mounted up. You got the officer right here. He's going to put himself in the center of the picture right here. Look at this little grin right over here. And then this guy snuck up here. He's nobody, but he probably a lieutenant or something. He got a little stick over here, got a flag, stuff like that. And this guy, man, he's got the best shot. But look at him. Look at the horses. This is the team driver starting here on the left. This is the caisson, which I'll get back to in a minute. And this is the cannon, which is first thing I want to point out to you, is being pulled in reverse, like a trailer. All right? They're not driven like a tank. So when you actually bring a battery into position, you would have to wheel the horses. So the whole battery, if you can imagine, like that Union artillery going into position on Peach Orchard, a battery would be trained for 4 to 6 guns to all make the turn at once. It'd be beautiful to see a whole battery go into position without being shot at. But so here we are, caisson, team, cannon, and then back here, you're going to have to, back behind every gun is what you see back here. Here's the caissons. I'm going to give you a close-up of these in just a second. But these are the ammunition chest, the limber chest as they're called. 1 limber chest on the gun, 2 limber chest on the caisson. What's the difference? There's a limber. It's got the lid open. It took me a little while to figure that out, but the lid is open. The lid of every limber chest is made of what? Copper. Why is it made of copper? It doesn't spark. Do you think they didn't find that out in a hurry? Right? If you can imagine a caisson or a limber going off in the middle of Pickett's charge when a Confederate shell would come in there, they said the artillerymen would cheer every time that a limber was struck, because it would go straight up, kind of like a miniature explosion. You could see the smoke come out of it, and everything. So anyway, that's a limber. That's what pulls the cannon. Now down below it right here, in case I don't get to it, is you have the darker bucket is a grease bucket. You're going to have axle grease. You don't think about this, but they rolling miles on these wheels. And the other bucket is water, because you're going to need water for what? Now there's your caisson. You might want to start singing. Here's the spare wheel on the back. How many wheels would you break? Now, point of order here. If you take the wheel off and you keep the limber chest on it, you can put a coffin atop. You don't put a coffin on a limber, because it'd fall off. You put a coffin on this because it balances it out. Notice the difference sometime, if you ever see it. Anyway, that follows behind. Now, let me stick with what I know. Napoleons. Each limber chest, which 3 limber chests travel with 1 Napoleon. 1, 2, 3. Each limber chest contains 32 rounds of ammunition. Now, this is just by the manual. Did they do this at Gettysburg? Probably not. It was probably anything you want to imagine. But according to the manual, out of the 32 rounds in each ammunition chest, 12 should be solid shot, 12 should be spherical case, 4 should be shell, and 4 should be canister. That is your breakdown of what a normal battery would be firing, what they expected to fire. Now you could mix and match that all you wanted. So 32 times 3, Each Napoleon carried, if it was fully loaded, 96 rounds of ammunition. When you open the limber chest up, the powder bags would actually be, in some cases, color-coded, because all the powder, all the balls in it, which I should have pointed out, on a Napoleon will be prefixed. Here's the wooden sabot. Here's where the powder bag would have been. Right here, I don't have the powder bag, but you would have had a bag full of 2.5 pounds of powder. Anyway, back to the limber chest. The ammunition doesn't sit like this. The ammunition sits like this, with the powder bag sticking straight up. So if you open the limber chest, they all look the same. You better have it color-coded, or else you don't know what you're pulling out. And time is, is precious when you're doing this. Now, so yeah, 96 rounds of ammunition. Come up. Now, let's get into Gettysburg. What are you going to see on the field when you get out there? These are the 4 most common guns that I see on the Gettysburg battlefield. Out here, that's some nice boots. I didn't think about getting some boots. Now, what you have here are smoothbore. Put everything I have together, everything I've told you. I got iron guns, I got bronze guns, I got rifle guns, I got smoothbore guns. I got different calibers of guns that are out here. But the 4 most common out here on this field are these little puppies right here. The 12-pound howitzer, the Napoleon, the Parrott rifle, which could come and usually came in 10-pound pair, but we do have a few 20s out there. I would, as you leave the visitor center, they're your closest look. I'll show you a picture in a minute, but the closest 20 is probably over here on top of Cemetery Hill. Probably never even noticed as you come over the crest, right there. So yeah, get out and impress all your friends when you get over there. And what are they about? Union brings 300, depending on who you read, 377 or 378 cannons to this battle. The Confederates bring 277 cannons to the battlefield. Now, here is the howitzer. The howitzer in front of Big Round Top and Little Round Top over here is pretty much used by the Confederates. Out of the 12-pound howitzers, 35 on this battlefield, the South brought 33 of them. Why did the South bring the howitzers? Because they didn't have anything else to bring. Yeah, they only had 2, right? A howitzer, let me put it to you another way. A howitzer would be hard-pressed to fire a mile. To put it to you another way, all the howitzers that E.P. Alexander could find within Longstreet's Corps were put into reserve because he didn't think they could hit Cemetery Ridge. A howitzer has a shorter barrel. A howitzer is what the name implies. A howitzer should be, lobs a shell in. If I wanted to hit the cameraman back there and not kill any of you in the process, I would get a howitzer and lob the shell over you. A Napoleon is a howitzer also, but it has a longer barrel. See, it's got this flare on the end. You go back to the howitzer, it's straight, it's shorter, which gives the ball more arc over a shorter distance, but it affects the range. I hope y'all are keeping up with this. Howitzer, here's your workhorse. 12-pound Napoleon. If you were to blindfold me and make me say what cannon is in front of you, I would say a 12-pound Napoleon, because that would be my best odds right there. Now, the 12-pound Napoleon is the workhorse of both armies. It is not named for the little dude with the hand in his jacket. Okay? He is, and his hat sideways. That's the one you're going to laugh at. Out of all that, you're going to laugh at the Napoleon joke. Okay. You just never know what people do nowadays, do you? I don't know. I'd take her to the house. It is named after Napoleon III, the dude down in Mexico. And what he wanted, go back to the beginning of my talk. What is the difference between the cannons you see at Yorktown and the cannons you see at Gettysburg? Napoleon III wanted that problem solved. And so he had the French engineers design the 12-pound Napoleon. And when, I know this is odd, but America, the United States Army, copied whatever the French did because of the little Corsican. We wanted to do that. So this was the workhorse. It's made out of bronze. It is a smoothbore. It can fire a little bit over a mile with a solid shot. And most importantly, when I've already showed you the canister round, their canister round came out of a smoothbore, and it was larger balls and a bigger, a larger spread over a shorter area than you could within a rifle gun. Now, one thing for you. Did I put this on here? I don't think I did. Nope. Gettysburg, in my opinion, I base this on nothing, but I think I'm correct. Gettysburg has the largest collection of Confederate-made Napoleons in the world, I think. Most people don't appreciate it as you drive down West Confederate. The way you can tell the difference between a Confederate Napoleon and a Union Napoleon is the muzzle swell. And I know it's ever so slight, but generally a Union-made cannon will have this reinforcement at the weakest part at the muzzle. When you ride down West Confederate, you will note that the Confederate tubes do not have that swell. They've streamlined it. They're conserving, cutting corners, if you will. So yes, there's the rear end. All right. Bronze gun. Now you can see the swell right here. Okay, rifle guns. 10-pound Parrott. Okay, very easy to tell. Once it's a black tube. All right, second thing is every Parrott, ladies and gentlemen, has a big rear end on it. You don't want me to spell rear? With a W? Rear, right there. Now these come in different sizes. This is a 10-pound. I already told you about the 20-pound. You could take them up to 30. You could take them up to 100. You might even take them bigger than that. But you're getting into coastal very easily right here. But they're all designed the same. The cannon is just bigger. This is cast iron, and after it is finished, it has a wrought iron band placed around the breech of the gun to reinforce where the most stress is going to be from the powder charge. In other words, it's a cheap gun that they've reinforced with some expensive metal on the end. It's stronger. And they were serviceable. Probably the second most. Well, I've got it written down here. The Napoleon, I should back up. The Napoleon, the Army of the Potomac brought 142 of those, and the Army of Northern Virginia brought 98. The 10-pound Parrott, which we're looking at, the Army of the Potomac brought 60, and the Army of Northern Virginia brought 44. The last one that is most prevalent, well, it's the Parrott too. There's the rear end right there. And this, anybody know the name of this ball? The casca ball. Casca ball. My cat has a casca ball. 3-inch ordnance rifle. How do you tell? The whole gun is made out of wrought iron, not cast. In other words, it doesn't have the fat rear end on it. See it? See the difference? That's a 3-inch ordnance rifle. You can instantly tell them from the rear end of the gun. See it? There's a Parrott. All right, now you're going to be smart when you walk out of here. Y'all going to be licensed guys. Y'all just go out and tell there's one. Tell Angie, give y'all a license. Huh?
What's that castable for?
Extraction.
What's the function? Is there a function?
A function. You mean the way it's cast?
No, the cast, the brown, oh, yeah.
Oh, the castable is for you to be able to maneuver it. So let me back up and see if you can. So right here, it's a very good question. The gentleman was asking what the castable was for. In true Matt fashion, I said something and didn't explain it. These hooks right here, sir, are for the ropes that would have been coiled in a figure 8 basically around the back. And so this thing is very, when Napoleon III designed these field pieces, they got it down to a science. They make it simple, stupid. All right, so up here where the trunnions are, where the tube rests upon the carriage, these are the cap squares, and they hold the tube in place. And all you do is remove the keys right here, and then you can throw the rope around the castable, the other end around a tree, and the end of the rope, other end of the rope around the muzzle, and you can hoist it right up. So you can pull that carriage out, you can insert another one, you can change the tube out. They're very practical. If you didn't have the castable though, it would be very hard to lock on to anything, to keep it stable as they were going out. It's a balance thing. Look at this. Very good question. So that's the 3-inch ordnance rifle. And the Army of the Potomac brought 152, and the Confederates had about half of that at 78. Now, a couple of honorable mentions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but some of the rare tubes that you will see around the park include, what kind of gun is that? How do we know it's a 3-inch? It doesn't have a rear end on it. All right. We're going to keep it a family show. Some of the oddities that we have in the park, one at the Peace Light, is the Whitworth. The Whitworth is the only breech-loaded cannon which was here at the battle. Every other cannon, all 500-600 of them, are muzzle-loaded, except for the 2 ones that were breech-loaded brought with the Confederates. Now these little puppies right here are the only cannons also that have a shell that is tapered to the barrel. Is it hexagonal? I think it's 8. Is it? I don't know. But there is no leakage when the shell fits the rifle groove. Well, there's very little leakage. So when I tell you when I'm throwing a football that this thing has torque on it, this thing is spinning when it comes out of the barrel, which gives it greater range and greater accuracy. This thing could fire up to 3 miles, but there's only 2 of them. So it's not battlefield altering, and I don't know how many. And apparently the recoil on them was so bad that it broke the carriage. It was, a lot of times it would break the axle or some part of the carriage on it.
So, there was also reportedly a shrieking noise from the shell when they would fire.
Oh yeah, a distinct sound to the shell. We've got one on display out here. Is it in the lobby? Somebody correct. In the artillery display? You remember? Might be. All right, what's that? Not a Napoleon. That's a James rifle. Why do you know this? Because look at the shape of it. But it's made out of what? It's made out of bronze. Look at the shape though, and I'm going to go back. See anything distinctive? It's about the same gun. It's almost the same gun, except it's made out of bronze. So here is an anomaly. You have a bronze gun shooting conical shell. We have 4 of these on the battlefield in 1863, and 2 of them are still located. Very rare pieces are located near the Pennsylvania Memorial. A James rifle called a 14-pound James. Bad to foul. Apparently they didn't cast a lot of them because the sabot, that zinc lining, it would foul up the rifling or something on it. Now here's a rare one. What's that?
24-pounder.
24-pounder. You can find this by the Mississippi Monument. There was, 4 with the Confederates. The handles right here are called dolphins. The handles are called dolphins, and sometimes you will see cannons, ladies and gentlemen. If you go to another park, I don't remember any here, but literally, ladies and gentlemen, the handles will be in the shape of a dolphin. So now you will know when you go up to the cannon. Y'all like this 101 stuff? Man, I'm pouring it on. That is a 24-pound siege howitzer. Why do the Confederates have a 24-pound siege howitzer here? Because that's all they had. That's right. That is the general theme of this conversation right here. If they had it, they used it. Now, they did have one the Confederates did bring. I'm going to get real deep with you Gettysburg people. Some of these LBGs don't even know. The Confederates did bring one 6-pounder to this battle. They brought one 6-pounder. And when they captured those 10-pound Parrots at Devil's Den, they dumped the 6-pounder literally in the field and left it. And rode off with one of the Parrots. Going back to the Cascable, what did they do? They took a perfectly good carriage and switched it out and put that Parrot, that 10-pound Parrot, on top of that 6-pound carriage and wheeled it on out of here. Interchangeable. Here's a back view of it. I don't know where that is. It ain't here. It's in a fort somewhere. Here's a 20-pounder. Confederates actually brought some of those. Six for the Union and 10 for the Army of Northern Virginia. And that is a rough sketch from Alfred Woad, which I just put up there. Okay. Well, you never saw it before. Pretty cool. All right, let's shoot this thing. You see the dance? 1, I'm down here on the bottom right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going back here. 5, 6, I'm way on the left now. 6 and 7. 6 and 7 are back here at the limber. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right here, you can't tell it very well, but right in the middle of it is G. That's the gunner of the piece. Right over here is the captain. I don't know why they stuck him on there. And back here is number 8, and I don't know what the heck he's doing. I don't know. I guess he's just standing around waiting on somebody to fall. But anyway, watch how this goes along. This is the starting position on any cannon in the Civil War. I mean, field artillery. Now, ammunition chest, gun. They would have them spaced out by yardage. I doubt they would really care once they went into the field. It would probably be the terrain that would shape how far between the limber and the gun itself. Now, the first thing that happens is I'll keep going back and forth, is the number 1 and the number 2 man step into the muzzle. They turn and they step into the muzzle. Why is that important? Because number 1 and number 2 are at the front of the gun. They both have 2 distinct operations. Number 1, his job, depending on what they're doing at that point, is to sponge and ram the artillery piece. I've got a sponge on one end, and I've got a wooden block on the other, which to push the round home. Now, you might notice, I didn't know what kind I had, with this block right here that it has a hole in it. All right, why does it have a hole in it? Because, ladies and gentlemen, because of the fuses. When you insert something, you don't want to be banging on the fuse, on the top of the shell. That was probably something they figured out fairly quickly, I would think. But this is your sponge rammer. Now, I step in, I'm sponging and ramming the piece. Number 2 is just standing there. What is number 2's job? His job is to put the round in. Once I sponge the gun, I bring it back out, I flip the sponge rammer over in my hand, and I would hand signal, because you can't hear, they would have hand signals. I would tap the muzzle of the cannon, which even if he couldn't hear it, he could see that. And that's the signal to that guy on my other side to load that round in there. And once that round is seated, you ram it home. That's why you want your biggest man on number 1. because you got to have somebody to push that thing. Dead weight. You're talking about on a Napoleon a 14.5-pound round with the powder bag affixed to it, you know, and you're pushing it by hand. So, you know, I'm not saying it's hard, but it, you know, it'll wear you out. So number 1 and number 2 step in. Number 3 has stepped into the rear of the gun. You're going to love this one too. He's back there tending the vent. That's 3 syllables. Vent. Everybody didn't think anything. Cameron thought it was just normal. Vent. Grits. Vent. The vent's the hole in the back of the cannon. Why are you covering the hole in the back of the cannon? When you sponge that thing, that sponge is airtight. That air has got to go somewhere. If you are sponging that thing out, what is the one thing that fire needs to burn? Air. If you cover the hole at the rear of the gun, it is called a thumb stall. I know you can't see it in the back, but this piece of leather goes over your thumb so you won't burn yourself. And you stick your thumb down on that and you seal the vent. That means that when you sponge it, you have the maximum chance of extinguishing any embers that were left over from a previous firing. You won't, even if they don't have enough men to thumb the vent, they'll find some to thumb the vent. They'll put a rock on it, they'll put a cloth on it, whatever they got to do. They are not crazy, especially if you're rapid firing this thing, so to speak. This thing's going to be hot. Now, what are the powder bags made out of? Linen or cotton? And what does that stuff do? Does it all burn up? A lot of times it does not. So number 3, if you're number 1 on the front, number 3 is your best man up there. You don't want some, you know, less than superior person. You don't want the dullest knife in the drawer up at number 3, all right? All right, so the gunner, which is right here, is called out around. And when he calls out around, he'll turn around, and if number 6 and number 7 can hear him, they'll start preparing the round. The gunner will call out, let's take an explosive round. I need spherical case, 800 yards. And what will happen is number 6 and 7 will throw the limber chest up, and on the back side of that limber chest is your firing table. 800 yards, they'll cross-reference it, they'll figure out the length of the fuse, and one of the 2 men will cut the fuse and fix it, prefix the artillery round and get it ready to go. Number 5, if you're following all these dotted lines, is the what the Navy would call powder monkeys back in the day. Number 5 will go back to the limber chest and retrieve the round and then come back up here and bring it to the front. On his way there, what it's showing you is the number 5 man will stop by the gunner and show him the round. So the gunner inspects the round before it's loaded in there. Did they stand upon principle during Pickett's charge? I doubt it. Okay, but in a normal exercise, you are not rapidly firing this cannon. So it's a very slow drill. So the gunner inspects the round, the fuse is set to where he wants it, and the round is taken up to number 2 at the far right and is inserted into the muzzle. Now at that point, number 3, well, let's keep on number 1 and 2. Number 1 and number 2 step out. And let me tell you, from having worked those positions, that's the best feeling ever, is when you get to step out. And I keep stepping too, as much as I can. All right? So, number 3, who has been tending the vent, doesn't need to tend the vent if number 1 is not sponging and ramming. So what does number 3 do? He steps out and he goes to the rear of the cannon. The rear of the cannon, ladies and gentlemen, is where you aim the cannon left and right. And Napoleon III designed the carriage so well that an average man can pull that 2,000-pound Napoleon. Remember I said 4,000 in Rev War. 2,000-pound Napoleon in the Civil War with 3 times the weight of the shot. They can move it left and right. Now, how do they do that with all this noise? Well, the gunner is up here aiming the piece, and he has hand signals. If he wants that gun to go right, he taps the right side of the trail. And that guy back behind will take that trail handspike, a piece of wood, which gives him leverage, and he'll pull it left and right. Now, when the gunner is finished, he will throw his hands up, and that is a signal to the number 3 man that he needs to return to his position. Now, meanwhile, if you watch the gunner right up here, he is also aiming the piece, both vertically and horizontally, while he's up at the tube. And what he's utilizing is this thing right here, which you can come up and see better once you, this is called a pendulum hawse. All right, and what this does, and they've all basically been stolen, but when we originally got the tubes back in the day, the mounts, that little top edge of the cannons you see across the field that make no sense right on the top of it. The reason it doesn't make any sense is because all the sight mounts have been stolen. But the sight mount is what this would have rested upon. And it's flexible. I don't know if you can see that. But your cannon is never going to be perfect. It may be like this. It may be like this. You're going to need to turn it. So it can float, in other words, on there. And so what I don't have is the sliding scale. So if I need a 3-degree elevation to throw this ball 800 yards, I align the rear sight, with something else been stolen, with the front sight of the cannon. Rear sight, front sight. And how do I do that? I do that through the elevation screw. Remember those screws underneath that you can't move because we painted them shut? Well, they moved back in the Civil War. Okay? Don't worry, I tried to move them too when I was a kid. But that's how you sight the gun. And now we get around to the actual firing of the piece. Number 3, when number 3 returns to his position, when the gunner throws his hands up and he returns to his position, the next command will be ready. And they would be if they could hear it. But when that gunner says ready, both number 3 and number 4 step in at the same time, behind the rear of the gun. You do not stand behind the wheel. Why do you not? You see this in Hollywood all the time. Why do you not stand behind the wheel? The recoil of it. And you don't think that in the haste makes waste? You don't think some of these rounds will cook off? Or somebody will be stupid? When they're making haste around here, you want to make that muscle memory that a soldier doesn't even think about it. He automatically is behind or away from that wheel. Broken legs would happen, etc. So number 3 and number 4 step in. Number 3 is there. The round is now seated. Number 3 steps in, and he would have this on him. It's called a priming wire. Many variations of it. But this, ladies and gentlemen, number 3 would put down through the vent and prick a hole in the powder bag, exposing the flame of the ignition system to the powder, pricking that powder bag, priming wire. Oh, yeah, pretty cool one right there. There they are in the position. So number 3 over here on the left would step out. And then we're getting around to number 4. Number 4 would insert the ignition system. You can see the lanyard. Some of you can see the lanyard right here. Number 4 is ready to fire the gun. Well, how does the lanyard stay placed on the cannon? How does the cannon actually ignite? Well, he pulls the lanyard out. Now you can see number 4 right there. You see number 1, number 2 getting ready. Number 3 is stepped away. Nobody's around the gun. This is the man in charge right here, either a corporal or a sergeant. And he is looking around, if he's got time, and seeing if the field of fire is clear, because he don't want to hit his own people. And when the lanyard is pulled, this is what happens. This little piece, which looks too big on the screen, But let's take this one with the wire right here. This little piece of brass tube is inserted into the end of the cannon, once again called the vent. And when that lanyard is pulled, it's like a hand grenade. You're pulling the pin on a hand grenade. Fulminate of mercury will be in the top of it. That's what you should learn from this lecture. Fulminate of mercury. And just like an ordinary kitchen match, what happens when you strike that white? When you pull the pin, it strikes the tube, and that little tube you see right there is filled full of gunpowder. So like a grenade, you pull the pin off, it ignites the tube of gunpowder. The hole has been pricked in the powder bag by the priming wire, and that flame goes straight down into that cannon. Boom, almost instantaneous. Friction primer, friction. Friction, the friction when you pull it, like that. Yeah. Now, we're not getting into all this, but here's the vent. See it? Here's the hole on the back. Got the neck, the knob. Oh yeah, look at that. All these guys up here salivate. You know the gun nuts. The gun nuts always get the first 5 rows, you know, that freak up here. Oh yeah, man. Matt, where'd you get that, man? I don't know, man. That's, wow. I'll tell you what, you even got windage on there. Woo, I'm going to have you over the house. I'm going to give you another cat. That's what I need, another cat. All right, yeah, so there's your parts. Gun goes boom. Fire goes down through the vent, strikes the main powder charge, and that ball comes rattling out of here. Now, don't ask me, because I haven't done a lot of live firing with Civil War cannons, very limited. But apparently, especially in a bronze gun, the gun would develop its own characteristics, like like golf. You know, how many times have you ever hit a straight shot in golf? Well, as the gun is fired, apparently the shell, especially in a Napoleon, rattling around in there, would dent over time the interior of that barrel. So that gun, over a long distance, it might slice a little bit. You would always probably have a little bit of variation. That's why where your gunner, the man, the crew, the detachment, I should say, that is serving the piece right there, that's where you're familiar with your weapon, because you can compensate for such things. All right. So the gun is fired, and once it's fired, number 2 and number 1 step back in. The last thing that they're going to do, if they have time, which is most of the time they have time, you want to have time, is worm this thing. Now the worm is to pull out the old powder bags that are burnt out on it. Okay, you can also take metal, I don't know how much you can see, but if you have to unload the cannon, this worm can go in there and grab the metal wire securing the ball to the sabot, and you can yank it back out. That's what it's also for. But you're cleaning the weapon. You are, the cannon, you are trying to minimize, or should I say maximize, the odds which you have of extinguishing any flames out in that area. So, couple things as we conclude. This is, I believe, don't quote me, I think it's Heckman's Battery in Ohio. Anybody know where it was taken? It won't be back in Columbus, you can guarantee that. You get me back in Columbus. The one thing I point out to you before you go, and I think you can tell by this picture, when you go across the battlefield, I've been pointing out to you green tubes. They weren't green. They were golden. They were shined. They were bronze. You know, they wouldn't let them. Now the Park Service, why do we let them get in poor shape like this? Because if we polished them all the time, then we would wear off the markings. So the oxidation, the greening, the oxidation of the tube, they tell me is actually good for its preservation. But you know how durable bronze is. So anyway, yeah, that gun was actually, anyway, it's labeled on the Library of Congress. This gun was actually used here at Gettysburg. Cameron didn't know that. He's going home download it right now. Now, a couple of things, anomalies. This is a 12-pound Napoleon. And this is from where? And why do we know it's from Rhode Island? Now, how in the heck did that happen? And real fast because I'm over time. But this gun was standing at the copse of trees. And while the Union cannoneers were working the face of it, a Confederate shell came in and hit the front of the cannon. Yes, and put a dent in it. Well, this is in the middle of combat, and I cannot ever, my words will never be able to translate how much adrenaline is going through these men right now. They want to fire this gun again. So what they do is, I told you that smoothbore had prefixed ammunition and rifle guns had separate powder or graduated charges. In this case, they tore the powder bag off and rammed it into the cannon to the base of it, because they didn't know if they could get the ball all the way down, but they knew they were going to get the powder in. And the powder has to go to the breech or else you can't ignite it. It's got to be underneath there. It's smart. They had thought of this. They rammed the powder down into the breech, and then they put the ball in there. And the gentleman took the sponge rammer and was trying to push the ball in there, and it wouldn't go. And so the gunner called for an axe from the limber chest, and they came running with an axe. Now how does this happen right here? The cannon, ladies and gentlemen, from rapid firing was that hot. And to go back to what I told you at the beginning here, bronze does what when it gets hot? It expands, and it cools when it contracts. And so they took that axe and they went to work trying to get that ball past the muzzle face, and they couldn't do it. And so when the gun cooled, the bronze wrapped around the solid shot. And then at some point, well, it sat in the State House, it sat in different places, but at some point, I forget, I had to look up the year, somebody finally thought to themselves, since it's just sitting in the middle of the Capitol, that, it might actually still be loaded. Yeah, there you go.
I think it was 1963.
Was it 1963 right there?
The centennial. I believe it was.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is basically Civil War 101. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it. All right, we'll turn the lights up, and y'all can get out of here. I'm sure some of y'all got to pee. For the hardcore people, if y'all want to try to stump me, because I'm not the world. Oh yeah. You're welcome to come up and see it. You have what is here called the gunner's haversack, which in some cases would be called a merce. All right. Nobody likes it. Nobody. This dog's y'all dull, man. I had some of the best material for you people. You people. So why do you carry it in this bag right here? Why would you not carry it outside?
Sure. Walking explosive.
That's right. It's a walking explosive. Plus, especially in a ship or something, if I'm a powder monkey, why were they called powder monkeys? Because they're usually little boys. Why do you want small boys? Because they can go up and down the stairs real fast. But they can't. They need two hands to get up and down the stairs. Well, on the battlefield or on a ship, you don't want your powder exposed, or you want it exposed as very little as possible, because that's a danger right there. So the gunner's haversack. If you put in 14 pounds on this thing, though, man, I mean, it's a lug. They probably have to hold it up, you know, and jog with it and so forth. But yeah, if you really wanted to, I'm getting deep in the weeds. If you really wanted to just cut corners, I mean, and I wouldn't suggest doing that, but it could be done. You could just park rounds at the muzzle. You have number 5, just roll them up there and just keep stacking them at the wheel. And you get number 2 to start shoveling. Number 1, ram them home, let's go. Boom. Boom, you know, is what you can do. Now, you know, you could have number 1's arm flying about, you know, 150 yards down range. There goes Don's arm. Did you see it? No, but I think we ought to go get it.
That's why you never had
It's out there somewhere.
That's why you never had your thumb over the top. You never wrapped your thumb over the top of that rammer, because if that thing went, your arm's going with it, you always held.
Oh yeah, he's talking about how you grip the sponge rammer and how you want to do it loosely and so forth, which is all true. But I'll go ahead and tell y'all, you got your hand in front of that dude. I mean, that's probably what, 1,200 degrees, some come out of there or something. I don't know. That's at least your problem. You're gonna be, it's gonna be cauterized. Yeah, sir.
When did they start mounting the tubes on the battlefield here on carriages? You see a lot of them just on stone and sand.
Oh, somebody, maybe Teresa has a better date than I do, but most of them early 1900s. They were actually cast here in Gettysburg. Does anybody remember the company name I used to? Gilbert. And so it's funny you say that, because the artillery several years ago, and I mean like 20 years ago, the Park Service went through this, you know, as we do this inventory, and some parks got rid of their old carriages and replaced them with new ones. That's fine and good. But Gettysburg declared their carriages, the metal carriages, not the original oak, you know, they would have had. Gettysburg declared their carriages to be historical. So instead of getting rid of ours, we actually refurbished them. We take the tube off, we actually bring the old carriage back in, and we fix whatever we need. You know, mostly something's rusted somewhere from water collection that would be happening.
The originals, the metal obviously were the originals of the period.
No, a recoil of any of those cannons on those metal carriages. That's why, you know, we're very lucky some teenager and, you know, tried to, it wouldn't take the stress.
An interesting fact, back in the 60s, I worked on Malvern Hill.
Yeah.
And it was part of the basement that was loaded with original wheels. And rammers and sponges just in big piles.
What happened to it?
I have no idea. I know some of the wheels we rolled into the Hudson. We had to get them out of that way because it's not even.
I knew a fellow, I don't want to name who it is, but I knew a fellow park ranger, it's going back to the 1960s. He went up to this farmer's house near Appomattox, and he bought, the farmer took him in the barn, and he says that, I don't know, it's been in my family a while, but the Confederates left this behind. He had a Confederate-made limber chest he was using as a tool thing, and my friend bought it from him. A Confederate-made limber chest. What else we got? What other questions we got? I'll get you in the back. Yep.
The bronze melts at a much lower temperature than steel. Is that one of the reasons you see more of them, or it might have been easier to make?
I take the casting process for the bronze was centuries old compared to the steel, which was not. So a lot more experimentation with it. And once you get into the use to something, it's hard to change anything, you know. Did they have better guns, cannons by the end of the Civil War? Yes, they did. But they had millions of rounds of ammunition. It'd be like changing NATO, sir, you know, in the middle of a war. I mean, you already got these guns shooting a certain round. What is it, what is it, NATO round? 7.62, right? So, God, take him out. Just go ahead, take him out right now. Just go ahead, take him out. Move on down away from him. Yeah, you just don't want, and they have better muskets, but they couldn't catch up with the technology. They could not mass produce in good enough quantity compared to like the muzzle-loaded Springfields and Enfields. What they did. Yes, sir.
Did they adjust the amount of powder that they would put in the tube?
Did they adjust the amount of powder? They did. On a smoothbore, they did not. A Napoleon would have 2.5 pounds of powder unless it was canister. It came with 2 pounds. On a rifle gun, they had graduated charges, but most of the time they'd probably be shooting one. Yeah, fixed or free.
Basically, it was the same powder charge. They just affect the range of the elevation of the fuse.
Yes, you wouldn't worry about the velocity, in other words. You don't care about that. You just worry about hitting the target. The closer it is. I did learn something else, not what you asked, but I thought you might find this interesting. For the most part, I'm not saying it's 100 and 100 right here. It's not exactly perfect. But for the most part, smoothbore rounds and rifle rounds left at the same muzzle velocity, but they couldn't go as far. Like the rifle round would contain more energy because of its shape and the torque on it than a smoothbore round. So the smoothbore round would lose energy faster flying through the air, which would, affect a lot of things.
That's called trajectory arc.
Trajectory arc. Yes, sir. You've been very patient.
Oh, good. So you mentioned the 4 main guns and then the more rare guns. With the rare guns, I'm thinking about resupply. Did they kind of like come into the battlefield and fire their basic load and then they were done because they couldn't get resupplied, whereas the other guns, had a supply chain set up for them? Or?
Well, I don't know exactly. I can tell you that they would have had a reserve artillery train, which means not that they would have had spare tubes, but they would have had spare ammunition. And one of the big problems with Pickett's charge is that they didn't have the reserve ammunition up because they didn't expect to need it. There is an account, I'm sorry if you're hitting me flat here, but there is an account in one of the, I say recent, past 10 years in Gettysburg magazine where this Confederate talks about in the middle of Pickett's charge, they figure out that they're out of ammunition and they bring some of the reserve ammo up and they break the boxes up open. This is in the middle of the bombardment and it's the wrong caliber that they have shipped up. In fact, if I remember correctly, I don't even think the Army had any guns like that. I mean, it was like heavy ordnance that they had shipped from Richmond. So how much did that affect them? At that moment, it affected them quite a bit. But they're just not keen. Now, going to the gentleman's question, if they had a rare gun, such as a 12-pound howitzer or a 24-pounder, or maybe a Rodman or whatever, how would you get ammunition for that? Well, the difference between the Confederate and the Union batteries, pretty much, and I like the Union, just to go ahead and get that out front. But, let's do it again. Why did the Confederates do it this way? And all they had. The Union streamlines their batteries. Like you will have 6 10-pound Parrots in this battery. Go into logistics about resupplying a battery. All you got to do is find 10-pound Parrot ammunition. On the other hand, a Confederate battery, they had the theory that they like to mix rifled and smoothbore guns. You see that a lot. What the Confederate theory was that you could come into a battle and you would have, rifle guns are good for counter battery fire. It's good for precision fire if you want to hit a target way out there. A smoothbore gun is more of a spray and pray type thing. You like that one? The Confederates would have maybe 2 smoothbore and 2 rifled. So it just compounded the logistics. In a 4-gun battery, it just compounded the logistics of resupply. Where would you pick them out? So in answer to go further down, the Confederates maintained their batteries within like a battalion. There's like 4 batteries, I believe, and 1 artillery battalion, if I remember correctly. And they would have had anywhere from, 20 to 28 guns within this battalion. That's where you would get into the wagons for that specialized. All your 6-pound cannon shot would be in that. If you only have 1 gun in the Army, surely would be within that battalion. Right there. Now, how it all, finally, where they parked it and how they did all that, I don't know. What else we got?
Did they move
move their batteries around during the battle, or were they pretty much?
Thanks for the question.
Were they pretty much stuck it in place and used it until they got blown up? In modern warfare, you move your batteries as soon as you fire. You fire 3 rounds, you move.
No. The biggest thing they would do is they would have to, in some cases, they would have to roll it back into place. There is a theory that's not what you asked, but it's something to think about. There is a theory that I heard one time that a lot of the Confederate, the poor shooting that the Confederates did on July 3rd, in part, I'm not saying this is the whole reason, but in part may have been because the trail of the gun, that's where the back of the gun rests on the ground, that the recoil of the gun consecutive times may have, we would call that in the South, wallered out a place in the ground. And even if, I'm not talking about digging a ditch, people. I'm talking about maybe an inch or two. But if you don't adjust the elevation or depression on that muzzle, and you jack the muzzle up over 1,000 yards, 1 inch elevation over 1,000 yards, and your shot's going to do what? It's going to overshoot. Now that could be. I'm just throwing that out as a theory right there. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Does the bar keep track of which tubes are where on the field?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We know that. Every once in a while, y'all like to borrow one. I don't know. We have to go get it. We have I don't have the inventory. I could find somebody that would have the inventory. What I thought you were going to ask is, we have a full-time cannon shop that's constantly rotating this. And if we're not fixing them, then we're painting them. Ed Bars, if you remember him, there's an infamous letter in the files of the Park Service where the Park Service went back in the 60s, went through a debate on what was the true color on the Civil War cannon. In other words, what color should the Park Service be painting the carriages in the modern day? And Ed Bars wrote a letter back, and he said that according to his research, he put this in the letter now, that the color was more akin to a doo-doo brown right there than it was a green, which might be which we see out here today. Yes.
The huge number of horses needed to carry this one cannon. First of all, is there any estimate of how many horses were present here? And second, is there any estimate of how many horses were killed and left dead?
Well, I don't know how many total horses. I could guess if I had to. It would easily number in the tens of thousands that would be here. To give you an example, sir, I have been told that which was never done, if the Confederate wagon train was put hub to hub, if they had one wagon train, it would stretch from Hagerstown, almost Hagerstown to Gettysburg, without ever stopping. Now, they obviously didn't put them on one road, and et cetera, et cetera. And the Union column, I've been told, their wagon train, if I remember correctly, was something like 60 miles long. I mean, so they had like 25% more, if not more than that, you know, in the Confederates. So let's look at it a different way. Let's take a round number. If I had 30,000 horses, how many gallons of water is that a day? How many pounds of fodder does that require? How many oats? Where am I going to move? You want to be an Army commander? This is where you're getting into it. You know, where am I going to pull that wagon train? How am I going to keep the infantry marching? Where am I going to keep my artillery? Where am I going to resupply? Where are they going to refuel, in other words? Where's the next stream? Where are these horses going to be watered? You would have to keep that in the back of your mind. The second thing, too, with these horses, you have to remember they have a Amish mentality when it comes to these animals. I'm not saying they don't love them, but they are not pets. They are machines who are out here to do a job. Did they have favorites? Yes, they had favorites, especially if you were riding one, you would have a favorite. But you go into it with them being expendable, is what they are, and you expect that.
What caused the most casualties in the Battle of Gettysburg, artillery or small arms fire?
I think somebody broke it down with, it was like 80% small arms, and I believe like almost like 18%, yeah, come on up, 18% artillery and like 2 or 3% bayonet, something like that. And then you got the anomalies. Uh-oh, he's going to ask a question back there. Here you go. He's going to try to impress you. You've been thinking about it a whole hour. Go ahead, hit him back there. Huh?
Explain firing by prolong.
Okay, so the most famous incident of that is when the 9th Massachusetts, Bigelow's Battery, retreats from the Peach Orchard, pretty much, or Wheatfield Road, back to the Trossel Farm. So what that means is when you're pulling, I probably shouldn't get her up. When you're pulling a cannon behind you, you know, you want to, all right, if you're pulling a cannon, just put your back to me. If I'm the horses and she's the cannon, she's being pulled in reverse, right? So that means that every time I want to fire this cannon, the enemy, if the enemy is this way, I have to turn the whole cannon around. I have to wheel the battery. Well, firing by prolong means that if I'm retreating from the enemy, what ends up happening is I never attach the cannon to the limber. I attach the rope, which that figure 8 rope I showed you the hooks for. I attach the rope to this, to the cannon itself, feed it down through the hole, the pintle hook, and down through there. Y'all are good. And then keep it attached to the limber. So in other words, when the horses move, just step backwards. When the horses move, the cannon is being pulled with me. Now stop. When I stop, she stops. Why is that important? Because the cannon, when the rope goes slack, the cannon naturally just sits down. So in other words, I'm still attached, but this gun can still fire. It's called retreat by prolong. Now, God help you if one of them horses up there, first thing I'd do is shoot one of the horses. I mean, what are they going to do? If that team bolts with that gun, rope to that, still tethered to that limber chair, I mean, you got a heck of a mess going on, you know? All right, y'all gonna wear them out. How about 2 more? Go ahead, John.
Some accounts of Bigelow's batteries, the situation was so dire, it depends on whose accounts you're reading, but they may have been firing at extreme close range by thumbing the vent. In other words, firing without friction primer. So,
You can do it. You can light. If you can get fire inside, he's asking the way they ignited the cannon at Bigelow's. If you can introduce fire into the vent, there's actually on most of our carriages here at the park a little socket. I'd have to show it to you, but it's called a Linstock socket. Now, you artillery guys sitting there, if I didn't impress you yet, I don't know what else I'm going to do for you. Right here. Didn't impress them. So there's a Linstock socket there, and basically that's your backup. If you don't have a friction primer, you take a piece of burning hemp and light that thing on fire, and it would be like the Rev War days. You would, instead, they didn't have friction primers. What they would do is blow on the rope, you know, like a punk, you know, like we used to light fireworks with, you know. You take that punk and you blow on it and you would set it off manually. But in order to do that, you have to pour, like the Rev War days, you just pour raw powder in the vent. Back in the Rev War days, they would put a quill in there, insert it into the vent, and then touch it off with a Linstock socket, the Linstock, so, and make it go boom. But when you do that, you have, not that matters at that point, you have a whoof, like those old flintlocks, and then you have a boom. It goes out. That's why when you go to Yorktown, to finish where we began, when you look at the top of their cannons, some of them are shaped like a seashell. It's got a little upside down seashell, and that's the basin to pour the raw powder in, so you can, you know, if you don't have a quill or something. It's probably pretty dirty. Anyway, friction primer you can shoot in wet weather. What are you going to do in windy weather with raw powder out there? Wet, windy, you know, friction primer is the way to go if you're going to do it at the house.
Yeah, artillerymen select technical expertise in terms of, you know, cutting fuses, gunnery sergeants.
Well, everybody should probably be cross-trained. as far as what they're doing. You would have everybody capable of doing any different operation. You would probably not want to. I'm just telling you how I would run the operation. I would put my strongest man on number 1, and I would have a backup. Number 2 should be your backup. The guy standing at the muzzle. They have a drill, and it's all varies depending on which number you lose. But they actually drill with reduced numbers. So they would know how to run back. If number 5, for example, the guy that runs the roundup, if 6 and 7 went down for whatever reason, he should have the capability to not only bring the round, but also prepare the round for that to come up. So the contingencies are always out front, as far as that. How's y'all's butts doing? Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it.